So, hello and welcome. Today, in How Women Build and What It Really Takes, I have the pleasure of being joined by Leah Holroyd, the founder of White Bicycle, who will be sharing the behind the scenes of her journey into entrepreneurship. And I'm also excited about being joined by Araba, an MSc student from Essex Business School, who is supporting the research into devising female entrepreneurship, which these interviews are feeding into, and ultimately giving us a picture of how women are shaping the current entrepreneurial landscape. Araba will be leading today's interview, so let's dive in.
Hello, Leah.
Hi.
Would you please tell us about your journey, how it took place, how it started, motivated you, and what are some of the fears you encountered when you started?
Yeah, sure. My name's Leah Holroyd, and I'm the co-founder and co-director of White Bicycle Limited. I started that company with my brother Finn about 5.5 years ago in December 2019. And most of our work as a company is designing and building online learning for clients. So it's all bespoke. An organization will come to us with a particular need. Perhaps they want to train their staff. They want a new course for their students. They want on-demand learning for members, and we'll work with them collaboratively over a number of months to sort of bring what they want to life. Before that, I've worked in online learning for about 15 years now. I worked for a textbook publisher in Berlin. I worked for a startup in London. I worked for a university in Australia. So a few different sort of contexts and experiences. And I personally, I think I reached a point where I'd wondered over the years what it would feel like to work for myself, to be my own boss. And that had always been at the back of my mind, throughout these different jobs. And I reached a point. So I was out working in Australia. I'd been out there for about a year and a half, and the job I was doing changed quite drastically and quite suddenly. And it changed into a job that wasn't really what I wanted to do anymore. On a personal level, I was feeling quite ready to come back to the UK. And it just so happened that two former colleagues reached out to me around about the same time and said, "We've got this potential freelance work coming up. Would you be interested?" And I'm not sort of superstitious or anything, but sometimes it just feels like the pieces are falling into place. So I thought, okay, if I'm going to try freelancing, this is the time to do it. The opportunity is there. So I came back to the UK and I started freelancing, and I built up a few different clients, and the work was coming in. And if anything, there was a bit more work than I could comfortably do by myself. My brother Finn, who I mentioned before, he's 10 years younger than me. So he was at university at this point. He graduated and he wasn't quite sure what he wanted to do next. So while he was applying for grad schemes, I said, "Well, look, I've got all this work lined up. You'd be really helping me out if you took some of this off my plate." We gave it a try, and we hadn't really given it much thought in advance. It was just quite a spontaneous idea, and it worked. He took to the work. He seemed to have an aptitude for it. Clients were happy because suddenly the work was getting turned around faster and sort of more reliably. If I took a day off or I was ill, it wasn't the absolute end of the world. So we freelanced sort of alongside each other for a year or two, and then just reached this point where we were like, "Oh, there's something here. This has turned into something that's actually working really well. Shall we take the plunge and make it official and start a company?" So I wasn't one of these people that had always dreamed of being an entrepreneur or a small business owner. It came about very organically through a series of sort of events and circumstances that just led to that point where it seemed like the logical thing to do. And I guess because I hadn't really planned on doing it, I was quite nervous. I was quite fearful. I would definitely say that without Finn, I don't think I would have ever taken that leap to setting up a business. I wouldn't have wanted to do it on my own. It was having someone else there to share the responsibility, to share the decision making. That made all the difference to me. So it was really important that it was a partnership rather than a solo endeavor for me.
Wow. So it sounds like you had really solid background and expertise in your industry. And
Mm.
then from opportunities just organically coming your way, you saw the potential to actually turn it into a business.
So would you say there was strategic planning, or you just relied on the fact that things were falling in place for you?
More of the latter. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
I'm happy to admit I'm not the best when it comes to business strategy. I guess the fact that we'd freelanced for those couple of years, it felt like we've identified an idea for a business, and in a way we've tested that out for a year or two. So we've kind of established that this works before taking the leap to register the limited company. There was definitely a sense when Finn and I talked about it that we had, at that point, this is just pre-COVID, we felt like we'd found a bit of a gap in the market. So there didn't seem to be many small companies offering the kind of service that we were offering, which was very bespoke, very tailored to each organization and their budget and their context and their goals and things. And I think we were perhaps sort of surprised as well by the level of demand. It wasn't just, I think I initially thought that it would be organizations that were completely new to online learning and that had no in-house staff that would take us up on the services. So essentially they would want to outsource the learning development to us. And actually our clients, when we were freelancing and when we ran the company, we had quite a mix of clients. So some of them were exploring online learning for the first time and needed lots of help and lots of hand-holding, had an in-house team, but every now and then the team would hit capacity and they just needed one or two extra people who could kind of parachute in, take a project off the team's hands or work alongside the existing team. So I remember being surprised that there were quite a lot of different contexts where we were being asked to work on projects. And so I suppose in a sense that felt like a strategic decision. You know, there's a bigger market for this than I first thought. So this feels like quite a good idea for a business. But in terms of the early days of the business, I remember thinking, I don't know if this will work long term. I don't know if the year or two of freelancing has just been kind of a lucky blip. So we will just have to take things as they come. We'll see what the demand's like. We'll see whether new clients come in. And yeah, we will just have to play it by ear. So there was a little bit of strategy, but also a lot of uncertainty. Yeah.
What are some of the reality checks you encountered? Did they meet your expectations? Were they above your expectations? Were they below your expectations? And how did you manage them?
Yeah, there were a huge number of lessons learned. Really, I went into running the business not having much of a clue as to how businesses are run. We had to learn it all from the start. And we had quite a few moments of just feeling completely clueless, or the unknown unknowns that you encounter and you just think, I don't know how I would have known this, but it's sort of come out of left field. Little things like I remember getting a letter from the ICO, the Information Commissioner's Office, saying you have to pay us an annual fee if you handle any sort of data. I remember opening the envelope, reading this letter and thinking, oh, this is a scam. This is nonsense. I'll throw it away. And then I thought, I'll just Google it to make sure. And I Googled it and it's a legitimate government team. And we did have to pay the fee. So there were things like that where you think no one tells you that there's going to be an annual fee for something like that. I think another big reality check for me was that, a big part of going freelance and then starting the business was that desire to be my own boss and to have autonomy and to have work-life balance and all these wonderful things. The reality of running a business didn't feel like that at all a lot of the time. It felt like the clients were boss most of the time rather than me being the boss. So I think especially as a small business, working with large organizations like universities and NHS trusts, and there is this power imbalance, there is this power dynamic that I personally find quite challenging. So, in theory, I should be able to say, I'm not working this week, or, I can't meet that schedule now that you've made those changes because it's just not realistic. I think as a small business owner, there was always the fear of if I say no, if I push back, if I'm too demanding, they will stop working with me and they will find another supplier who will be more amenable. So that was something that I found really quite difficult, especially in the first sort of 2 or 3 years of running the business, was learning to say no, learning to be assertive, to ask for what I needed, or or to say what was realistic for us. I found that quite difficult. So that was a real learning curve for me when we were up.
And just curious, how do you view this now? Do you still feel that they would have gone to someone else, they would have found someone more flexible?
I don't think it was as much of a risk as I perceived it to be. But I am still conscious of that power balance. But because I've been aware of the fact that I find those situations challenging, tried really hard over the last few years to get better at them. I'll check with my brother, am I being unreasonable? Is it okay to say this? And that's a great check because, he's not to generalize, but he's a guy in his 20s. And one of the reasons that we work well together in business is that we have quite different stances. He is often the more cavalier. For example, we've been offered projects and my initial reaction has been, oh, we've never done that before. I'm not sure if we can do that. Maybe we should say no. His reaction tends to be, we can do that. We can figure it out. I can look up how to do it. We can bring someone in if we need help. So we have that interesting balance between the two of us. So when I spot something like kind of assertiveness that I know I'm struggling with, he can be a really good sounding board while I'm trying to work on that and to put that into practice with clients.
That's great. And the different approach, whether that's age related, whether that's gender related, but it's just interesting to notice that and how the awareness of your own strengths and weaknesses can allow you to be a better business owner because you know what to pay attention to.
Well, so he will run things past me. He'll say, I've written this email. Am I being too blunt? Or does this sound rude, or am I sort of towing the line? And we go back and forth a bit. So we definitely help each other out on that with our strengths and weaknesses.
So, Leah, did you have to change your mindset to achieve success? Did you have to change certain things to try and achieve what you wanted to achieve for your business? And then doing so, did you get support from mentors, from coaches? How did you do it?
Yeah, I think so. The assertiveness was one thing, thinking about money mindset as well. I think talking about money is something that a lot of small business owners find difficult when I meet other sole traders or other small business owners. Valuing your own time and your own expertise and the service that you provide can feel quite challenging. If anything, I think it got easier when we became a small business rather than freelancers, because when you're a freelancer, to me, there is very much the sense that you are a person being paid this amount. And I think clients sometimes kind of weigh that up and think, well, I don't earn that much, or I'm paying how much for a day of your time? Whereas as a business, I think there is a sense that as a business, you have overheads. The rates you charge are not just pure payment for your team. And 2, we talked this through and we made the conscious decision within the first year of business. It wasn't right from the start, but Finn and I made the decision to switch from charging day rates, which is typical for freelancers, to charging fixed fees for projects as far as possible. And I think that was really helpful because clients, I could go on a whole rant about day rates and things, but one of the problems with day rates is that if you are slow and inefficient, you earn less money because it takes you more time to do the same work. And I think Finn and I are both good at being really focused, being really efficient. I know for myself, I've been doing this type of work for 15 years now. I can do it quite quickly without the quality suffering. I feel quite confident in that. So day rates, they don't really work for me for quite a few reasons. So those 2 switching from freelance to company and from day rates to project fees, both of those things really helped me to become more confident talking about money, quoting for projects, charging certain fees. And that was a big part of, learning to be a business owner. That was something really important for me to get to grips with. I think another thing was about, I mentioned expertise before. So sort of recognizing that at this stage, I have a certain amount of expertise that is valuable to potential clients. The amount the amount I charge should reflect the amount of expertise and experience I have. But also, one of the things we did as a business, so most of our work is in online learning, but we also started perhaps 2 years ago, we started to put more and more emphasis on accessibility. It had always been part of our work to try and make online learning as accessible as possible, but accessibility shifted to be much more of a focus for us, and we started offering things like accessibility training and audits alongside our other work. And part of that transition to open up that new income stream, I had to own my expertise in accessibility as an area, which I say that I don't love the word expert, because one of the things about accessibility is that it's one of those fields that keeps growing, and we are still learning about it. We're still figuring out what best practice looks like. So I'm always a little bit distrustful of people who call themselves experts in accessibility, because I'm not sure how you can be. But I had to get to a point where I thought, okay, I don't know everything, but I know enough that I have something to say about this. I can share what I know with people who know less about this topic, and I can actually have an impact. So there was a sort of confidence shift there as well, to be able to say, I want to be part of this discussion about accessibility. I can teach people about it. That took a little bit of time, I think, for me to recognize that I was sort of at a level where I could do that. Like I say, that opened up an extra income stream for us as a business, which was really helpful. The same thing with online learning, but earlier. So when I worked in London for the startup, I can remember going through a bit of a crisis of confidence. And then when I went out to Australia and I worked for the university, I really felt like I was learning a lot. I could see I was working very closely with the academics and getting really good feedback from them about how I was helping them and sort of sharing new ideas. So that it was probably that job in Australia that helped me feel really confident about my expertise in online learning. So I brought that with me into the business.
Can you tell us some challenges you faced and how you resolved them along the way?
So many challenges. Yeah, like I say, a lot of challenges were just around, how do you run a business? How do you market your services? How do you manage cash flow? All these things that you don't have to think about really before you open a business. I looked for sources of support and mentoring and so on. So I did quite a few business support programs, some of them local, some of them further afield. I did the NatWest Accelerator. I did a business growth program with the British Library. They were a bit of a mixed bag, some were a lot better than others. And sometimes it was challenging to see how I could apply what I'd learned from those programs to my business. There was a lot of kind of sitting in rooms and making lots and lots of notes, and then coming back home to the home office and thinking, right, what do I actually do now? So putting it into practice was still sometimes a bit of a challenge. But I think one of the best things about those types of programs is the opportunity to meet other small business owners and to hear what they're doing, to hear what's working for them, or just to let off steam about the stuff that you're all finding difficult. It's so reassuring to think, oh, it's not just me who can't get their head around the accounting software, or it's not just me that's having a bit of a slow patch now. Because especially when you work from home, and like I said, we're a team of two. When things go quiet, you often you just kind of, I panic. I think business is drying up. What am I going to do about it? What can I do? What can I do? And sometimes just talking to someone else who says, oh yeah, it's not just you, it's all of us. Times are tough at the moment. It doesn't fix the problem, but it reassures you that you haven't done something wrong, that, there's a bigger sort of economic climate out there that might be affecting things. So yeah, being able to meet other small business owners through those programs has been incredibly helpful and reassuring. And in some cases has led to, new friendships and stuff, which has been wonderful. A lot of those programs had mentoring elements, which again have been a mixed bag. I think part of the thing with mentors is that you need to find someone that you kind of gel with, not necessarily that you agree with on everything, but there needs to be some sort of spark there, I think, to make it work. I didn't have that with all my mentors, but there have been certainly two that I can think of that have been really, really helpful. And those conversations have done a huge amount to help me time to reflect. It's getting an external perspective on the business, which is really helpful, because when you're in it, sometimes you can't see the wood for the trees. So having a fresh perspective is really helpful, and just allowing yourself the time, if it's an hour-long mentoring session, giving yourself permission to take an hour out to think about the business. Is it doing what you want it to be doing? Does it still fit in with the reason that you started it in the first place? Those kinds of reflective conversations have been really helpful with the right mentors.
What would you say are some of your proudest achievements, and what will you do differently?
So in terms of achievements, firstly, the fact that although we've now made the decision to close the business down, the fact that we were able to run it for, it's just over 5.5 years now. I'm really proud of that, because, I've seen the statistics about the number of small businesses that don't make it to a year or don't make it to 3 years. So the fact that we've managed to last for over 5 years, I'm really proud of that. I'm proud of a lot of the projects that we've worked on. So we've been able to work on projects that have had real impact. For example, we've worked on several e-learning courses that are all about disability inclusion for London Underground, the UN World Food Programme, Sony Pictures. So, kind of big organisations, and they're using those courses to train their staff to be more welcoming and more inclusive for disabled customers or disabled colleagues. We've done a lot of work with NHS trusts in London, and that's been things like improving cancer care for patients. So, we've built courses for staff to help them understand the patient experience, help them have end-of-life conversations with patients with terminal diagnoses, things like that. It's funny, with online learning, you spend so many days just kind of sat at your desk, copying and pasting things or plugging in images or formatting, that you can lose sight of the reason you're doing it. And it's really, I remember saying to Finn, like, let's make a conscious effort to actually take stock every now and then and look at the courses that we've put out there and the impact that they're having, because it's so easy to lose sight. But that's a lot of the time, that's what makes the job worthwhile, really, is remembering that they are really making a difference. And the accessibility stuff as well, that's become a real passion for me. The fact that I've been more vocal, I've posted more on LinkedIn, for example, about accessibility. I've sort of looked for ways to get involved in accessibility and inclusion, and that's led to some great opportunities as well. So it's over there somewhere. I was one of the contributing authors to a new book that was just published this year that's about inclusive learning design. So I'm really proud of the fact that, sort of pursuing that passion has led to opportunities that 5 years ago I wouldn't have expected at all. In terms of things I would do differently, it's tricky, isn't it? I don't regret anything at all. That's kind of my outlook on life in general. I don't believe in having regrets, because you never know how things would have turned out if you hadn't done the things you did. And there are times when we've probably missed a trick, but we've learned from those experiences. Sounds cheesy, but I'm really grateful for all those sort of learning opportunities along the way. One big lesson learned for me is that a lot of the things along the way that I thought would happen naturally or automatically, it turns out they actually require quite a bit of effort on your part. And things like we've won various awards along the way. In fact, when was it? Sort of 2021, 2022 maybe. I was selected as one of the top 10 female entrepreneurs in the country by The Telegraph and NatWest. And at the time, it's fairly early days of the business, and I thought, this is it. This is the one thing that is going to kind of take our business and really help it to grow. And that didn't happen. I'm not saying it was a bad thing. We had some nice publicity, but I realized that to really kind of capitalize on something like that, I think you have to be the sort of person that will take it and run with it and make it happen. You have to go out and find opportunities for publicity. They're not just going to happen naturally. You have to contact your local radio station or your local TV station and say, this amazing thing has happened, come and interview me. You have to be the sort of person that when you're at one of these events, you go up and introduce yourself to the head of NatWest or that MP or that minister for such and such. So there were quite a few points where I think if I'd been perhaps a bit more confident or a bit more driven, I probably could have made more of certain opportunities than I did. And I don't regret it. As we've said, we're closing the company down at the moment, and that's our choice. It's not because we've run out of work. There's no kind of failing. Finn and I have both reached a point where we just feel ready to go and do something else and to start a new chapter. So now that I've got to that stage where I can say that and admit that I'm looking forward to doing something else, it kind of makes sense that I perhaps wasn't super driven to keep growing the business. It's not my life's dream to run an e-learning company with a staff of 100 people or whatever. It's not what I want. So yeah.
That's really, really interesting. And I think again, a lot of that self-awareness there of the drivers. I was thinking, is this a female trait that we don't want to own our achievements, shout about them and go out there and tell everybody that we are winning awards, or is it kind of more personal? As you say, the drive behind that's not there.
I think it's a bit of both. I mean, there were definitely, in that top 10, there were definitely women who were really good at that kind of self-promotion bit. There's an amazing woman who she runs a company making breast forms for people who've had surgery, and she carried one of these breast forms around with her in her handbag, and whenever we went to a lunch or a networking event or a drinks reception, she would pull this thing out of her handbag and she would show it to the Minister for Small Business or the CEO of NatWest. And she was just completely confident doing it. And it seemed to work, and it's brilliant and it was memorable and everything. So I do think some people are either naturally like that or they have decided I am going to become like that. And, that's what I'm going to do. For me, I think it's partly about sort of drive and passion. I can be quite sort of self-deprecating. I don't always like to blow my own trumpet, but there are sort of other achievements that I've had perhaps outside of work that I feel more comfortable talking about than, say, business awards. So I think for me, it's kind of how much, it's not that I didn't appreciate the awards because it's always lovely to get something like that. But I guess on some level, some achievements have more value for you personally than others. And like I say, looking back, now that I kind of know how I feel about the business, it sort of makes sense that even when we were winning awards, that wasn't necessarily the most important thing kind of going on in my life at that point, because I've always had these sort of other interests and other ambitions and things. So
it's interesting, and this is the work I deliver, and obviously I'm exceptionally good at it, and I'm winning awards. But as you said, that passion, is that something that I'm really passionate about? That I would actually put myself out there and shout about it. And thinking about the woman, was that something that arose from her personal experience?
Her mum had breast cancer and had had surgery afterwards. So that's where the idea for the business had come from. That story, I listened to her tell that story, and it was amazing and it was moving. You got the idea for the business straight away. It was one of those, sometimes you hear about a business and you think, yes, fantastic. Of course this should exist. What a brilliant idea. And hers was one of those. I would say that I probably feel more that way when I talk about accessibility than when I talk about online learning. So I was diagnosed with an eye condition, a kind of macular degeneration, 3 years ago now, maybe something like that. It was during COVID, and accessibility had always been it was always part of my job. It was always something that I took seriously, but I'd be lying if I said that there wasn't a shift at that point, because suddenly it was personal. I think I'm the kind of person, when a diagnosis like that, or some piece of news that kind of creates a potential challenge, I'm the kind of person that wants to read up on it and find out as much as I can and look into it. And what does the research say? What tech is out there? I want to kind of have the answers as much as possible. So as soon as I was diagnosed with this thing, I started reading up and I started learning about other forms of sight loss and treatments for them, and just got involved. And that's something that I felt really driven about. So even when the company closes down, I think that's still something that I'm going to want to be involved in, and I'm going to want to keep reading up on. And yeah, when I think when I talk to people about accessibility, I probably am sort of more passionate than when I talk about online learning, which is, I like the work I do. There are some projects that I'm really proud of, but I've never been an evangelist for online learning. So yeah, I suppose it is a bit less of a passion.
So, Leah, can you share some advice for women in entrepreneurship, based on your experience and feedback and your networks?
In terms of advice to young women who are thinking of starting a business, this is going to sound like a cop-out, but one of the things that I had to learn was to take everyone else's advice with a real pinch of salt. Because when you say that you're starting a business, or when you tell people that you run a business, everyone has advice. Everyone has ideas on how to do it. Some of them are people who've, like, well-meaning relatives who've never run a business in their life, but they kind of want to live vicariously through you, and they've got all these ideas and things. Some of them are business advisors who maybe have run a business and have a lot of experience, but they probably haven't run a business like yours. So again, I've spoken to kind of advisors and things who've told me, oh, you should be doing this. You should be running your business this way. You should be offering this service. And it's really important that you develop the kind of skills and the confidence to actually step back, think about what they've said, and decide whether it's right for you or not. But that has to be your decision. So I would say be open to people's advice. Listen to what anyone has to say, because you never know when a great idea will come along. But don't be afraid to say, actually, that isn't the right fit for me, or that's not what I'm going to do, and here's why.
Thank you very much.
Okay, my pleasure.
Thank you so much, Leah. So many great insights. We loved everything you said about, how you stumbled into the business, the learnings that you've shared. It's been really a lot of reflection and a lot of awareness. I'd be really curious to see how you take all of these learnings and experience to creating the next chapter.
Fantastic. Thanks very much. Nice to meet you both.